Welcome to the fourth episode of the Becoming Conscious podcast. I'm your host, Ethan, and in this episode, we're going to be talking a little bit about meditation and how to deepen your meditation practice. I'm going to be talking about why your practice isn't getting deeper and deeper with time, that maybe it's because you're not able to carry your meditation into your everyday life, rather than the more common notion that you're doing the wrong technique or that your mind just can't focus. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about how you can help support the show. If you have enjoyed the previous podcast episodes, or if you enjoy this one, you can head on over and leave a review on iTunes. That helps tremendously. And if you want the show notes for this episode, you can head on over to becomeconscious.org/BC4. Again, that's becomeconscious.org/BC4. And there I will link any relevant links. I'll put the audio download there and anything else that is applicable to this episode. That being said, let's get right into the episode. So, the topic of meditation. First of all, there are many different types of meditation. There's mindfulness meditation, similar to the Zen or Zazen practices of Buddhism. There is self-inquiry type meditation. There's a certain contemplation into the nature of being. All of this, it doesn't matter what type of meditation. There's certain yoga practices that are like meditation. But whatever meditation practice you're doing, it's going to be stifled by the inability of the mind to concentrate. And if your mind is always distracted and in monkey chatter mode, then you'll never be able to get to the deepest parts of your consciousness and who you truly are, your true nature. And so in this podcast, I'm going to talk about why you're not getting deep in your meditation practice. This is not because you're doing the wrong technique or that you're not spending enough time on the cushion, but it's something else. Rather, it's that the root of our meditation problems lies in the fact that we don't transfer the habits of meditation into our daily life and our daily routine. For example, if you observe the average American going throughout their day, you'll most likely find impulsive eating of foods full of sugar, fat, and salt. Most people constantly check their cell phones, which leads to cell phone addictions. There's just this inherent inability to control compulsive behaviors and act on impulses. Most of our actions, as I'm an American, these are a lot of the things that I'm trying to get over in order to deepen my own meditation practice in my life. But most of our actions are mostly a result of reacting to the external environment rather than taking initiative and being able to watch our impulses rather than react to them, which leads to us feeling constantly tired. There's constantly a need to stimulate ourselves with TV, social media, or any type of distraction that we find in our environment, but there's just this inherent inability to sit still and to be silent and watch the workings of the mind. Of course, this isn't indicative of everyone. There are some people who are very calm and have a meditation practice that they have curated throughout the years, but I found that this is the type of lifestyle that our culture promotes with advertising, consumerism, the instant daily news that you find on TV, as well as social media platforms like Twitter. I know this because I've been struggling myself to kick a lot of these habits, and it's not easy. I haven't completely kicked them all, but I'd like to say that I'm pretty far down on the journey to letting go of some of these negative habits, impulses, and addictions. And I'm not saying by any means that those who have these habits are inferior to those who can transfer the mindful living practices into daily life, and you have who are able to sit still and don't get affected by these habits. I'm just saying that they're maybe further along on their meditation path, but comparing yourself to others and thinking that you're better because you have kicked these habits is just a working of the ego. It's just the ego or the self boasting itself for its ability to grow and its improvement over the average American. So I don't want you to fall in that trap. I don't want you to see yourself as better if you kick these. Just that the reason that you're kicking these habits is in order to deepen your meditation practice. It's not impossible to react more mindfully and deepen our meditation practice in regards to the actions that we take and the choices that we make throughout the day. But by slowly incorporating meditation into our daily lives and continuing the meditation habit for years, if not decades of our life, we can slowly start to kick these habits and live a more meaningful life and a more fulfilling life of awareness, peace, happiness, and overall, just a massively increased ability to enjoy what's right in front of you. My vision with this podcast is to help you create action in your own life. I don't want this to be a show of, as some people call it, mental masturbation, where you're just constantly thinking up ideas, lost in the ideas of the mind. Because if you want to get to the deepest levels of consciousness, you have to initiate these practices in your own life and to continue them over the long term. And if you can see the benefits of meditation every single day for as far as you can see in the future, so not stopping your meditation habit in the foreseeable future, but committing to doing it every single day without a goal to be done in, say, a year or a month or something. But in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about a lot of the concepts in the book Conquest of Mind by Eknath Esaron. I highly recommend this book. You can find the link to the book in the show notes at becomeconscious.org/BC4, because BC is short for Becoming Conscious, as you probably guessed. So this is the 4th episode. And in the book Conquest of Mind, Esaron wrote about how we live at the mercy of circumstance. Our actions, emotions, and overall way of life is at the mercy of whatever arises during the day. And all the small tasks that we feel that we need to get done get in the way of the more important tasks or doing the things that we value, like reading, meditation, contemplation, and etc. But most notably, we live at the mercy of our thoughts. Our thoughts are the result of the external circumstances and conditions that we live in and that arise from our day-to-day lives. So really, if you think about it, our entire life and our series of thoughts throughout the day are just up to chance. We don't really have that much control over our lives. This is a different topic to get into in a future podcast about free will and do we really have it. But in this episode, I want to talk about how we really don't have to control over our thoughts and our reactions to the world around us. And through curating and changing the choices that we make throughout the day, we can develop a freedom in our lives that allows us to do that which we value over that which is our impulses and acting on our compulsions. And I want you to think about this concept of our thoughts being subject to our external environment rather than our internal environment. And yes, in certain circumstances where we're thinking about a topic, we're kind of choosing the thoughts that we're thinking, not necessarily what thoughts arise, but we're kind of keeping our thoughts in our mode of the intellectual topic that we're contemplating. But in the majority of circumstances, just think into your daily routine, or just think into the thoughts that you had today and how they were brought about by external cues and external pointers that kind of reminded you of something, which put you on that train of thought, and you didn't really have control over being reminded of that thought based on external cues. And with meditation, we can learn to notice all these external factors, but react based on mindfulness rather than impulse. So this really goes into how good of a day that we have. Good days and bad days, at least I think, are really reliant on whether we have good external cues or bad external cues. It's really based on chance. And with practice, we can make this based on how we live our lives. We make it so that it's not up to chance, and that we can choose how we react, so that every day is a positive day where we're constantly able to choose our reactions and be content with the present moment. But the importance of this realization is that through meditation in daily life involves learning and acquiring the ability to choose our responses to anything that life throws at us. Many people may say, due to the outward-oriented nature of our pursuits, especially happiness, that they might give the retort that, why can't I just focus on my goals and changing my external circumstances to make me fulfilled in life? Why can't I just buy that new possession that I'm saving up for? Won't that make me happy? I mean, I feel pretty excited once I buy that new car or that new house. Or that one, maybe you guys have heard of minimalism, and that's kind of been debunked, that buying stuff isn't going to make you happy. But there's still this other pursuit that I found that's a little bit more latent. It's the pursuit of achieving our goals, and that we feel that once we achieve our goals, once we make a certain amount of money, once we attain a certain metric of success that we set for ourselves, then we'll be happy. And sometimes these goals can be very just very hidden and not really indicative of the minimalist mindset that stuff can't make us happy. But I think that we should just sit down and think for a little bit and realize that that's just not the case. Yes, consumerism and achieving goals bring short bursts of excitement, but that is not happiness. Our society mistakes excitement for happiness. Because if consumerism were to fulfill us in the long term, then that would mean that when we achieve a goal or buy a product or stuff, then that means once we get that burst of excitement, we will be happy for the rest of our lives, and then this will just create long-term happiness. And obviously, we all know that a day later, a week later, we're brought back down to our normal level of well-being that we operate on. And obviously, this pursuit sounds a little bit ridiculous when you put it in this point of view and you think about it in terms of, wow, stuff really doesn't make you happy because it doesn't create that long-term, long-lasting joy that living in the present moment can bring. But I suppose that people hold on to their beliefs in consumerism due to a variety of factors like social signaling, the need and want to belong, and because of cognitive dissonance. When we consider minimalism, we may feel dissonance at the idea. And this is referring to cognitive dissonance, which, if you don't know, is that uneasy feeling that occurs when you try to hold two opposing beliefs or ideas at the same time. When you try to reconcile with two opposing ways of thinking. So when we hear about minimalism and the whole anti-consumerist, or at least impulse shopping, that mindset, we feel an obvious dissonance with the fact that we spent so much time pursuing wealth, possessions, and goals of success, that we don't really want to consider the idea that all these pursuits were wasted ventures and that they never brought me happiness. And there's just this uneasy feeling that we don't want to admit that we wasted so much time in a futile pursuit that we just push the thought out of our mind and pursue consumerism with even more rigor. And there are two ways to resolve this dissonance and to help start down the path of being able to react based on meditation rather than materialism and impulsive behavior. And one, obviously, the way to resolve this dissonance that you don't want to do is that most people fall back into the consumerist culture and self-justify why this is the best approach to happiness. I mean, how on earth could someone be happy with nothing but the present moment, right? Well, I think that's wrong. But the second point, which I would urge you to do, is that we can change our perspective on consumerism and realize that, yes, we may have made a mistake in pursuing it in the first place because we kind of were forced to do it by our culture. But instead, we can realize that we don't want to waste even more time, energy, and resources on pursuing a false version of happiness that our society gives us. And instead, we can then change our path to orient toward a more mindful and less stimulating path of mindfulness, and choosing to do that which is best for our long-term values rather than short-term excitement. And that's what I want to talk about in this episode. In one of the ancient Eastern texts of the Upanishads, they have a name for this dichotomy. This dichotomy of comfort, of choosing the choices of comfort but negative outcomes, or discomfort but positive outcomes. They call it Preya versus Shreya. Preya, Preya, refers to doing that which pleases and stimulates, but which is often degradatory to ourself in the long term. Whereas Shreya, spelled similarly but with SH at the beginning, refers to that which is beneficial in the long term, not just for you, but for those around you as well. Simply put, meditation in daily life involves always choosing Shreya over Preya. Always choosing that which is most beneficial in the long term to our lives and to the lives of those around us, rather than pursuing short-term pleasure and comfort. Of course, this isn't always easy. In fact, it's very, very difficult to do. We have very deeply rooted addictions and habits that are hard to cut, like our food addictions and our cell phone addictions, and obviously the mainstream addictions that you hear about of alcohol, drugs, that sort of thing, just the obvious addictions. But even the more latent and less talked about addictions like cell phone addiction and even the addiction to thinking. But I think I'll just focus on the more pertinent addictions at the moment. Not that the thinking addiction isn't pertinent, but I'm bringing up this dichotomy of Preya versus Shreya because I want to give you the choice next time you realize when you're in a situation of doing that which is comfortable and doing that which is beneficial but uncomfortable. And rather than thinking that you have to act on Preya or comfort because it's the only option, you can now realize that if you choose Shreya and that's that which is uncomfortable, then this will also lead to a deepening in your meditation practice by a small amount every time that you choose Shreya over Preya. He who always chooses Preya or pleasures throughout the day isn't going to make much progress in meditation because they're undoing their progress of their daily meditation with the inability to be mindful and control their impulses throughout the day when they choose Preya. Because as I realized, thinking is just an impulse. We have this impulse to constantly be thinking, and if we're also acting on our external impulses, then this leads to an inability to deepen our meditations. And this sounds good and all, but what I didn't realize at first, and what I'm still beginning to realize, is the sheer pervasiveness of this concept of the choice between Preya and Shreya in every action or reaction that we choose throughout the day. There's obvious situations in our life when there's two roads we can travel down, that which is beneficial and uncomfortable, Shreya or Preya. Like alcohol addiction, drug addiction, sexual addictions, and addictions to your cell phone, addictions to constantly being distracted. And these are the obvious paths where you can see that when you don't pursue your distractions or addictions, that's going to be much more beneficial, but you still react to your impulses anyway because of their strong mental grounding in your life, and they just have that strong grasp on you because of how long you've been in that addiction. But there are also the lesser obvious situations in your life where you can react in Shreya over Preya. These situations are ones like choosing to be accommodating to the needs of others rather than being selfish and persistent on getting what you want. Also, the ability to control your emotions, not getting angry or annoyed by something that someone said or did, but being able to observe that anger within your body and not reacting to the anger impulse or any other negative emotion for that matter. Every single part of our day can be used as a means towards growth. Bad situations with people we may not like so much and get on our nerves, this will help us develop patience. I've always heard the thing about, or the concept of, you always want to hang out with people that are like-minded and that support you, and I really agree with this. I think that's really powerful when you have conversations and you hang around people with similar mindsets to you and similar worldviews. But what Esseron promotes in Conquest of Mind is that it's also very beneficial to hang around people that you don't like, because if you have an approach toward meditation and developing meditation in your daily life, you can use these situations of being around people that you don't like as an ability to grow your reaction to impulses. And this is very similar to driving and how most people get into road rage when someone, say, cuts them off or does something that angers them. But instead, during these situations, we should watch our impulses to get anger and use these situations to develop patience. And the very act of developing patience is that which deepens our meditation practice. And don't shy away and have anger towards what people say or the situations that aren't so positive, but any situation that usually makes you annoyed or angry, instead of seeing this in a negative light, try to see it in a positive light, in which you can use these situations to grow and develop your mindfulness and patience abilities. And these situations will help you develop mental mastery over yourself, and this is really what leads to growth in life. Another situation is being able to forgive someone and be considerate of others during hard times. And now that you'll understand what Preya and Shreya and the choices that we have in our daily lives to further our meditation practice, I want to talk a little bit about how we can actually implement these practices into our daily lives. Of course, that doesn't mean that you'll be able to watch and control your impulses right away. In fact, that's nearly impossible if you're beginning the meditation practice, or even if you've been meditating for years, months, or years at a time. It's still very hard to get at these deeply rooted impulses and addictions in our daily lives. That's why I think that meditation for the long term is very powerful, because if you focus on it in the long term, this will help you uproot your addictions for good and get over your addictions and your impulses. So, I'm not perfect either. I want to be transparent with this podcast. And I'm going to tell you right now that I'm trying to implement the practice of eating that which is healthy rather than that which is stimulating. This is one of the most deeply rooted impulses that most people have in our American or Western cultures, that we have this impulse to eat that which stimulates. You want to grab that brownie or those chips or whatever it is that has salt, sugar, fat. We eat all those things because they're comfortable and they stimulate us and they feel good. But if you want to deepen your meditation practice to the deepest levels, this involves working towards overcoming the impulse of unhealthy eating. And I can't remember who said it, but Esseron mentioned how one guru and mystic in India that was highly acclaimed, he was talking about how developing the ability to change your diet and to eat that which is healthy is one of the most powerful meditations, or just the fact that it's a very helpful meditation that we can do in our daily life. And I can say that in my life, I'm starting to implement this practice in which I will eat healthy foods in situations where it's easy. When I get home from school and I just have to eat lunch, I will most often grab a salad. But when there are stimulating foods at my disposal, or say I'm at a restaurant, I often order that which is stimulating, just because that impulse is so deeply ingrained in my life. But just the fact of realizing that you chose Preya over Shreya, that you chose comfort over discomfort and growth, that will help you begin and take the first step towards mental mastery. And you can realize that you didn't really make a mistake, but that you could have made a better choice in that situation. And I found that I often eat unhealthy or give in to my impulses when at the end of the day, more often than I do at the beginning of the day, because at the end of the day, I feel that I have no willpower left to choose the right choice. And I don't know, I think willpower is a cool concept and all, but I think that all in all, when you look at it in the scheme of things, I think that most often willpower is used as an excuse to do that which is comfortable. It's like, oh, I don't have enough willpower right now, I can change my habits later. Right now, I just don't really have willpower. I'll just give in to my impulses. And I think that, yes, willpower may be a thing, and maybe it's something that controls our lives, and maybe it's a real concept. But I often catch myself using willpower as an excuse to do that which is comfortable. And so I find that we grow the most in our meditation practices when we choose that which is uncomfortable in the most hard and difficult times of our day or our life. In those situations when we're physically exhausted and we just don't want to do anything but stimulate ourselves. If we can watch our impulse to stimulate ourselves in those situations and not react on it and choose Shreya instead, that is when we will truly grow and deepen our meditation practices to the deepest possible level. But not reacting on impulses is, as I said, pervasive in every single action that we take in our lives. And I only gave you guys a few examples. I gave you probably not even close to 1% of all the situations in life when you can choose that which is uncomfortable, and that which brings you discomfort but helps you grow. But you can start with the impulses that don't have as much of a grounding over your life as do other deep addictions. You can start with, say, what I've been doing in my own life is with showers. Yes, there's an impulse to always take the warm and comfortable shower, and I have been looking into the Wim Hof method and the benefits of cold water and just cold immersion in general. And so I stopped giving in to the impulse of warm showers, and now I started very simply where I just turned the water to cold at the end of my shower, and then I just worked my way up, getting into slightly just pushing that level of discomfort just a little bit until now I'm able to take the entire shower, my the entire length of my shower or where the water is very cold in temperature. And now every time I have the impulse to turn it to warm water, I just realize that's the comfortable path. That's not going to help me grow in life in any means. So I hope that point has really sunk in by now, that doing things that pull you out of your comfort zone is the best way to grow and improve your life and deepen your meditation practice. As I've mentioned, nothing comes easy. Anything worthy of doing requires effort and discomfort. So here are some practical examples of following discomfort in our sometimes mundane lives. So the action that we can take is most notably when you notice that an impulse has arisen of something that maybe doesn't benefit you or those around you. Don't act on it immediately. Realize that it too shall pass. Watch the impulse. Watch your compulsion to do that action that you in the past used to react to immediately, and instead wait for it to subside and then act rationally and based on Shreya rather than emotionally and based on Preya. Another thing that we can do is develop the practice of one-pointed attention. Stop compulsively checking your phone when you want to be doing work and doing that which is valuable in your life, like reading or meditation. When you pick up the book, don't get distracted by anything else. Put all your attention, focus all your attention on one point of awareness on that book. And this is especially pertinent in the aspects of intellectual work, and even more so in meditation. But if you focus on it in intellectual work, it'll also help you deepen your meditation. Another way that we can practice this is by slowing down. Don't try to get so much done in a day. Don't try to be constantly busy. Because sometimes when you just slow down and do that which you want to do, but more intentionally, with more mindfulness, that will really help in your practice of deepening meditation. And I find that when you try to get too much done in a day, then often the work is shallow and not meaningful. Because we try to get so much done. There's all these habits that we want to get done. And I personally find that some of the habits, you don't need to do daily habits. If there's something that you want to create a habit with, do it once a week, do it twice a week. Do it in a certain manner where you're not going to get burnt out on it, in which you will also have time for the most important habits that you want to create. For example, in my life, I have created a daily meditation and contemplation practice, as well as a daily exercise practice. But then there's also other habits where I can't find the time to do them every single day, so then I just do them twice a week, such as writing, journaling, critical thinking, and I'll do podcasting 2 or 3 times a week because I can't find the time to do it every single day. So rather than going wider and doing more, go deeper into your work and being more intentional. Focus, as I said in the previous point, focus on one thing and slow down, focusing your full attention on that one thing. Be content with wherever you're at and focus fully on the task that you're doing in the present moment rather than thinking about all the other things that you could be doing in this moment. Another way that we can deepen our meditation is to train the senses. What does this mean? It means being able to choose what food you intake, which is a highly meditative practice. It means choosing to just sit up in your meditation rather than slouch down. It means choosing to like that which you dislike. It means all these different things. So that's another way to deepen your meditation. And then a few final ways is that you can put others first. If you can put the needs of others before the needs of your own, this will help lessen the grasp that the ego and the self has on your life, which will make it easier to rid yourself of the ego in your meditation practices. I found that this is one of the hardest of all. It's sad that selflessness is very hard in our modern society, but I just think that's because we live in such an ego-driven culture that encourages everyone to constantly prop up their ego and self-concept, that spending time not thinking about ourselves but about others is very challenging. But overall, doing so and being selfless will deepen your meditation because you're not giving into your ego and your thoughts as often, but considering that maybe you should respond and take action on other people's needs and that you're not the center of the universe. All of these things are hard for the ego or for the self to do because the very fact that deepening your meditation involves lessening the ego and being more mindful. But if you do these things, you will grow in unimaginable ways in your meditation, especially if you work hard to push yourself out of your comfort zone. Because I've found that comfort equals ego. The more that you stay in comfort, the bigger that your ego gets. Everyone is so engulfed by their egos and always thinking about themselves. This is understandable given the nature of the society that we live in, but that doesn't mean that you need to be egotistical and focus so much on yourself and not give any thought towards others. You can change this. Don't focus on so much on yourself because selfishness leads to hatred, resentment, jealousy, etc. I read this great quote in a book I read recently about self-justification and cognitive dissonance, and the quote in this book was, "Love is the extremely difficult realization that something other than oneself is real." Iris Murda said this. And again, it's not overnight that we become a selfless sage who always puts the needs of others before the needs of oneself, but at least we can make the first step and realize when we act based on selfish desires and when we could have acted based on selfless desires instead. And it's easy and comfortable to always be boasting the ego, talking about yourself, about your memories, what you did, what you accomplished, thinking about yourself whenever a thought pops into your mind. And I found that deepening your meditation means next time you're having a conversation with someone and you get an impulse to talk about yourself and boast your ego, try to hold back and notice that impulse, but don't react and actually start talking about yourself in an egoic manner. Therefore, not adding to the collective ego of our society. Or, after you catch yourself saying an egoic phrase that boasts your self-identity, realize it and work to change it in the future. Don't repeat the same mistakes over and over again, and instead learn from your mistakes. In our society, we're taught that mistakes are bad. We want to be always perfect. We always want to be right, and no one wants to make mistakes. But as Carol Dweck said, I'm paraphrasing here, that when we learn from our mistakes and we develop a growth mindset, which is developing a mindset in which we grow from our mistakes rather than pushing them off because we don't want to think about them. This is what helps us grow the most when we get over the desire and the overall impulse that our society gives us to avoid mistakes at all costs. If we focus on changing these mistakes and not making the same one, this will really help us be more selfless and implement the actions that I just said. And so I hope you guys enjoy this episode. It's not easy. I want this to be a lifelong practice for you guys, constantly realizing in your own life when you can act based on discomfort rather than comfort. But I think that if you work to incorporate these things little by little into your daily work, then I promise you that your meditation will deepen much more than you've ever experienced before, and you'll start gaining much more fulfillment out of everyday life than you could have ever gained through mindless stimulation and comfort. So that wraps up the episode. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you want to read Conquest of Mind and go really deep into this idea of meditation based on our actions in daily life, you can read the book Conquest of Mind, which I link in the show notes at becomeconscious.org/BC4, where I link you the book on Amazon. And some other things that Esron talks about, he talks a lot about mantra meditation, which I haven't personally tried myself, but I think I might try to start implementing it. And it's where you just repeat a mantra and you focus on it. Whenever a thought arises other than the mantra, you just dismiss it. It's kind of like mindfulness meditation, where in mindfulness meditation you focus on the breath and you try to let go of all thoughts and focus your complete attention on the present moment and on the breath. Whereas mantra meditation is very similar, but instead of the breath, you're focusing on a phrase very often written by a spiritual mystic, or such as a phrase in the Bhagavad Gita, or a spiritual text that has very deep implications. And that when you start repeating these and focusing on that text and with your complete concentration and letting go of all other thoughts, this is kind of a meditation in and of itself, and helps you put better raw material into what your thoughts pull from, as Esron kind of states in his book. So that's kind of what you'll get out of the book Conquest of Mind, which I highly recommend. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so, non-monetary way that you can help support the show, is through iTunes. Just leave a positive review, 5-star review there. That really helps to bring the show to new viewers, to help get this show into new ears, and helps it spread tremendously. Or Google Play if that's where you're listening to this. Thank you guys all so much for listening to this podcast. I hope that you will think about some of these things in your daily lives. Think about Preya versus Shreya, and in order to deepen your meditation practice. So thank you guys all so much for listening to the show, and I will see you guys in episode number 5. Goodbye.